Thank you, everyone, for coming. I know you're all very busy, and so I appreciate you taking the time to attend this workshop or this kickoff meeting. Liz, if you could just skip to the next slide, please. So, as I said, I'm the One Washington budget manager. We also have a good chunk of the One Washington team here. We have Lizzie Drown, who's the PMO project manager, and Matthew Toney, who's also part of the project management team. We have Trin Bowie, who is the finance specialist, and our OCM team is here as well. And then we have our tech team and OFMIT is attending as well. And then Liz is our wonderful management analyst who's going to be running the PowerPoint and recording this session. So for the agenda for today, for the next hour, is we will get a modernization roadmap review and a program update from our project management team. I'll cover the timeline as it's laid out for agencies for submitting One Washington budget requests. And then we'll cover in a little more detail the budget instructions that were released last week, including the criteria for agencies to submit, and then also the business process mapping tool that'll be covered by Chris McKeeva, who's from OFMIT and has been helping One Washington heavily. Chart of accounts is going to be covered by our finance specialist, Trin. I will go over the agency resource calculation tool that was sent to POCs last week after budget instructions were released. And then we have our industry OCM partners from Deloitte here to talk a little bit more about agency support that One Washington will be providing currently and then in the next biennium as well. And then we'll also talk about the budget exception process that's been developed by One Washington, including the tech team. And we'll touch base about the workshops that are going to be coming up this next month to help agencies develop their budget resource requests. We'll put in a quick plug for the budget resource page and then talk about next steps and then answer any questions that anyone has. So, next slide, please. Okay, I'll turn over to Matthew or Lizzie.
Yeah, hey, thanks, Brianna. All right, so folks have probably seen this. It is not new, but this is our high-level roadmap for the entirety of the ERP implementation project. We are currently in phase 0 for readiness, preparing the state and the project and our team to partner with the system integrator when they come on board in the fall to start implementation of phase 1A, which core financials. So during this readiness phase, we're focused on a selection of a software solution, selecting a system integrator partner, and what we're calling readiness activities and agency readiness efforts are part of that, the baseline assessment you see in the top line, but also readiness activities such as validating data and systems with agencies, standardizing the use of the integration layer, which we'll be working on over the next about 8 months, business process readiness work, such as looking at the structural design of a future chart of accounts, doing some business process mapping for our current state business processes, supporting review of WACS RCWs and policies for future impacts, and then also, as I said before, just agency readiness assessments and additional readiness support for agencies. So that's what phase 0 looks like, which is now. When the SI starts in the fall, the system integrator, we will move to that phase 1A, implementation for core financials. The work plan and the detailed timeline for implementation and for that phase will be built with the system integrator once they start. So we have a high level understanding of, when our go live date is July 2022. We understand our launch date and we know, the basic functionality of design, support, test, those sorts of things, but the detailed work plan will come in partnership with the SI at the beginning of that phase. So around the turn of the year, end of this year, beginning of next year. So as I said, that go live for phase 1A core financials will be July of 2022. We will also start support for phase 1B, expanded financials and procurement, in the beginning of 2022 and look to implement that in July of 2023. And you can see the subsequent rollouts for phase 2 and phase 3. Support and maintenance and support for a live system will be up with the launch of phase 1 in July. Sorry, I'm checking a question here. Go live is just AFRS, or does it include agency systems that are finance related and working closely with AFRS? I don't think we have the slide here, but I know we have it in the information provided. And Brianna, correct me if I'm wrong, but go live for phase 1A will include, we do have that functionality listed out on the roadmap of what functionality that will include. And it will include the transition of AFRS and any agency systems that are also included in that plan. So there wouldn't be any agency systems you didn't know about, for example, that, but any agency systems that are included in the scope for phase 1A would be included in that go live. Any other questions for me before I hand it back to Brianna? All right, thanks.
Okay, thanks, Lizzie. Liz, if you could skip to the next slide, please. Oh, okay. Sorry, there's a question from DOL that when AFRS goes live, when do you expect to turn it down? There's still ongoing planning around this with statewide accounting as well as OFMIT of what that decommissioning AFRS looks like. Right now, the tentative plan is to close out the previous fiscal year's CAFR in AFRS. So then that pushes it out at least till using AFRS at least until I think October, November timeframe. And then there's obviously some decommissioning activities that have to happen around that. But again, that's ongoing planning that's happening with statewide accounting and with our ERP advisor and industry experts who are familiar with other states and counties and cities that have gone through the same kind of transition, and with OFMIT.
Can I jump in for just a minute? This is Ann Bruner. So I want to be also very clear to add to Brianna's statements that at Go Live, that means all transactions will be happening inside of AFRS. So it's not like you can use AFRS to do transactions processing. So I just want to be clear that while it might be there and available for closing activities, it is not there after July 1 for regular transaction processing. Back to you, Brianna.
I'm sorry, I have to come off mute. And you just said all transactions will be having inside of AFRS. Do you mean the new ERP?
Yes, thank you for that qualification there. The transactions that normally were in AFRS will now be in the new ERP.
Perfect. Okay, thank you, Ann. This is the budget development timeline for agencies that we've planned out. As you can see, in April, wrapped up the agency system and data inventory that the tech team, One Washington tech team, had started in the fall. And that becomes the focus point for agencies' budget requests. And we'll talk more about that a little bit later. And then last week, a lot happened. Budget instructions were released. Also, you received this invite, and then your agency received, point of contact received the agency resource calculation tool that you'll be using. That's been pre-populated with your information. Again, we'll talk about that a little bit later. in July, there's going to be 3 weeks worth of different budget workshops to help accommodate agencies' busy schedules. Excuse me. And then also an important date in July is July 10th is the last day for agencies to submit a request for an exception. And we'll talk about that a little bit later, but there's a form and a process and criteria to go through with that. And then August 15th is the due date for any agency budget requests that are going to be considered to be included in the One Washington consolidated DP are due August 15th. And then One Washington will roll all that information up and put together a decision package and then submit it to OFM budget for consideration to be included in the governor's budget. Next slide, please. Okay, so to jump in and talk a little bit about the budget instructions and criteria, how we got there. Like I mentioned, the basis for agencies' budget requests will be the system and data inventory that the tech team had been working on for roughly 6 months, I think, where they had requested, they'd sent out a request to all 100+ agencies, higher education, to report back any information related to agency systems that would be impacted by the ERP. So that would be for, and that was for all functions, for finance, HR, payroll, all of that. From that information, there were 44 agencies that reported impacted systems and interfaces. And then from that, since as Lizzie mentioned and showed you in the roadmap, this next biennium will focus on core financials and expanded financials and really AFRA's replacement. So from that, we paired the system and data inventory for the 44 agencies down to just agencies that had impacted finance systems. You go to the next slide, please, Liz. Okay. So from that 44 agencies, we took just the impacted finance systems and interfaces, and then agencies also self-reported the systems and interfaces that wouldn't be replaced by the ERP and that you didn't already have the internal skill set to support. And so that is the focus of, that's the information that's been populated into your agency resource calculation tools, requesting you to calculate the technical resources you'll need to make those modifications to the impacted finance systems and interfaces. Next slide, please. And then this, and all of this information, we'll put this PowerPoint up on the One Washington budget resource page, but most of this information is in more detail on the budget page. But this is the workflow for how we'll go about. Oh, sorry, a question came in. Is there a published list of the 15 agencies? Yes, so it's on the budget resource page along with the 44 agencies that reported impacted systems. It also has for each agency the number of systems and interfaces that were impacted. And then yes, the 15 agencies are listed on the budget resource page. This is the workflow of how you'll work through the process of calculating your technical resource needs. And again, it's just using that tool, attending workshops, and then working with the tech team to calculate your needs and validate any concerns or resource needs you have. Next slide, please. Okay, and then next, I will hand it over to Chris McKeeva, who's a business architect with OFM IT, to talk through one of the supporting tools that'll help agencies determine their resource needs. It's business process mapping.
Thanks, Brianna. Hi, everybody. So the business process mapping effort that we have been going through is to help define what the current state looks like and then also give you a glimpse into what we're planning for phase 1A. So what it does is define our business functions and processes, and then helps you see the relationships and dependencies between those. So we put together a tool to use as a data point. This is just one for you to consider as you're looking at technology roadmaps, thinking about modernization strategies, or looking at your budget proposals, or even how you plan your base work going forward. So it's to help you understand what we're planning for phase 1A, and then where things might be headed in the future. If we go to the next slide, you can get a look at it. So this is an interactive tool that as the data is made available, you can click on any one of the process areas and it will provide a concise definition of what that is, and we've tried our best to make sure we're capturing those in the terminology that relates to the state of Washington today. And then within each of those different business process areas, we have also related that to the information provided for how that functionality and features work in a modern ERP solution. So for each of those, we have a list of features and definitions for each of those, so you can see how those work today. So again, I want to stress that this is just one data point for you to consider as you're working on your request or other planning that you're doing in the future. It's also, we've related the language for the future state to that's used for modern ERP solutions to help start getting you familiar with that. And many of the processes that are illustrated on this diagram, keep in mind that they're not necessarily systems today. They might be manual processes, or a bulk of them might happen outside of the core business areas altogether. Are there any questions? It looks like there is a question here from Kirk at DOL. Who do you believe will be in charge of the tool, the agency budget manager? Do you mean the estimating tool for submitting to the One Washington program, Kirk?
There's two tools. I think, yes, the estimating tool, I definitely believe it's the budget manager, but this particular business process mapping tool.
Okay, the information for this has been relayed to us by the different business function area owners. So like for finance, that would be statewide accounting, procurement with DES, and then in some cases with the statewide accounting and so on. And then we've also worked with our experts from Plant Moran to help us understand how the processes we have today relate to functionality in modern ERP solutions. So I guess the answer is, yeah, it's a combination in this case.
So as we feed you the data, this tool will get built out, is what I think I'm hearing?
Actually, this tool will be more built out as we look at the different functional areas and see how those are provided through a modern ERP solution. And as we get closer to each phase, we intend to make that data available. But the tool that will be used to provide information to the program as far as impacts to systems, that would go through a different process. And I'll look to Brianna to answer that question.
Yeah, for the agency resource calculation tool, we are ideally, I think that'd be owned by the agency budget manager, but as we requested for this meeting and for the workshops, since it deals with system modification, then IT obviously at your agency needs to be involved, and since it's finance systems, then we'd encourage you to also include finance subject matter experts to make sure that we cover all our areas for when you're calculating your needs. And
There's a question from Wendy with DES. Can you explain how this tool pairs with expectations around guidance for only interfaces not replaced by the ERP and no internal skill set? How will it help us get to the estimates? Wendy, as I noted, this is just one data point for you to consider. I think as you drill down into each of the processes and see the different functionality that's provided, hopefully that's where it starts to cue you in on what features and functionality is planned to be available in phase 1A or in any of the subsequent phases. And so that as we start getting, closer to the procurement area, we'll start building out that information more so you can determine those things. And then that helps you understand if, possibly you might have a system in your organization that might need changes, and so you would build out an estimate there to, be able to make those changes. Or maybe it helps you to, plan your technology roadmaps going forward so you're not making significant investment in things that are planned for replacement in a later phase.
thanks, Chris.
Thank you, Brianna.
And then next we'll talk about, Trent will be talking about the chart of accounts work that's happening with the One Washington as well as statewide accounting.
Yes, thank you for the opportunities. Included in the biennium 2023 budget instruction is a chart of accounts straw man. A straw man that you're going to be looking for is just a drafted, very high level view of what the state is directionally thinking with regard to a new chart of account design. Keep in mind that it is a very high level view of what the state is thinking. So as you are looking at it, we are looking for you to basically get one key takeaway from looking at that chart of account straw man, and that is your chart of account, the underlying structure will change. The extent of how it's going to change, we will know better as we have our system integrator on board and giving us more professional expertise with regard to the software. Why is a new chart of account design important at this juncture in our process is that we have built that straw man based on a review of what the state has needed with regard to a chart of account designed in the past 30 plus years, as well as taking a look at what is available in the future ERP in building that straw man. And again, looping back to the key takeaway, it is very high level. We understand that there's more information to come. So the key takeaway again is that the underlying structure will change. So we ask for you to basically take a look at the people, process, and technologies. People in the sense that it will change, and we are providing you with the best information that we have today. As far as the process, so if you're taking a look at your current system today, if you hard-coded your chart of account, and the chart of account will change as we implement the new functionalities, you know that you're going to have to accommodate for that. If you are using the indexes today, that will also change because the current index usage today is unique to AFERS, and we may or may not be able to crosswalk that to the new functionalities. As we were building the straw man, the state is looking to standardize the chart of account for all agencies. And so if your agency has some uniqueness with regard to like hard coding, that's going to change as well. So and as far as technology, if your agency is hard coding some chart of account today, you will be impacted. If you have agency interfaces into AFERS today, your future interface will change to reflect the new design. So the key takeaway is that we are providing you with as much information as we know today with regard to the new chart of account. But be sure that the chart of account, the underlying structure will change, and we are providing you as much as information as we can so that you can have the information that we have today to better plan for your budget needs. Are there any questions? Okay, if there's no questions, I'm going to go ahead and hand it back to Brianna.
Thanks, Trin. And then we're just going to quickly go over the agency resource calculation tool. And I will present. So again, this was sent out, and I hope everyone can see my screen now. This was sent out last week after budget instructions were released, and includes your agency's information that was reported in the system and data inventory. I'm using OFMs just for presentation purposes. There was only one system for OFM that was reported, but still, this is the data that in this tab with your agency's information, or data tab, is your agency's information, and then important information of we don't have the skill set to support it. It won't be replaced by the ERP. Also, we're asking agencies to look at to consider when you're at the workshops discussing with the representative from statewide accounting as well as our tech team about the possibility of replacing some of the systems. There are different recommendations that were made because this finance list that was pulled together for all of the agencies was reviewed by Brian Tinney, who's the finance business owner for One Washington, also the director of statewide accounting. And so there are some systems where we think, but obviously probably don't have as much information as your agency, that the system could be replaced by the ERP. So I think that will be part of the discussion during workshops as well. But as you saw, there's due date August 15th. There's instructions in here, how we got to these systems and interfaces, even though most of you reported more. The summary tab that pulls together all of the information, you just have to fill in the 3 highlighted tabs. And again, if you just pick your interface, then it will populate the system name. You put in the description of work, what type of work, the start and end times. This is all information that'll help us develop the decision package, but also help the tech team to refine and validate your needs. The IT positions are all listed in here. We pulled, and the salaries pulled from its information on OFM's website. Plug in the hours, it'll calculate the number of FTEs. And then because each agency has different staffing models and requests different objects E and J and T at different dollar amounts, we're requesting you to fill that information in here, and then to also send a copy of your agency staffing model with this when you submit it, with all the relevant positions included in there. And then there's a contractor tab. It's the same thing, just if your system is supported by a third party, if you could just fill in the same information, estimated hours, estimated hourly rate, then that'll calculate. And then the assumptions tab, if you just include any information that will help One Washington, including the tech team, understand and justify and validate your resource needs. It'll also help us as we're putting together the decision package to help support your request. I will stop presenting there, and then we can.
Yeah. Oh no.
Okay, and then Liz, if you could pull the PowerPoint back up, please.
Well, he just maybe he'll get his own place.
And then next, I'm going to hand it over to our OCM team, who is going to talk a little bit about other agency support that we'll be providing on behalf of One Washington. Obviously, since we've pared the budget request for agencies down to just technical resources.
Thank you, Brianna. Just want to make sure, can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you. Good afternoon, everyone. This is Jennifer Rocks, and I work in collaboration with Emily Pointer, advising and supporting the organizational change management efforts for One Washington. As Brianna just mentioned, the focus of the DP requests and the budget instructions are pertaining to the technical support that certain agencies may be needing as a result of One Washington. You also saw at the beginning how that information was based on the agency system and data inventory work that our broader team has completed. Around the same time as they being our technology team, conducted their assessment, on the organizational change management side, we conducted our baseline readiness assessment survey. And through our results and through various meetings that we've had with agencies, we know and understand that organizational change management is another area of concern for some agencies. And what we want to do first is to talk about what are some of the activities One Washington is going to do, knowing that agencies may not receive or be able to ask for additional funding specifically for organizational change management activities in the agencies. So this slide is specific to the One Washington organizational change management support that we'll be providing. A couple of these, we have a little bit deeper overview on the next slide, so I won't go into it yet. For example, we have communication materials. We are meeting with the point of contacts, the POCs, this week. And then we're going to talk further about, expanding upon the POC concept. Under leadership engagement, we have been conducting agency readiness meetings with agency directors, and we have focused on the most complex agencies based on the results of the agency system and data inventory work. We're also then going to follow up and conduct a further deep dive meeting with those agencies, primarily to talk further about the results from the baseline readiness assessment and further understand additional support that agencies may need as we continue to work through One Washington activities. Another important goal will be to talk about upcoming agency readiness activities over the next several months. So with that, Liz, we'll go ahead to the next slide, and there'll be two areas of focus, again, based on the results of our baseline readiness assessment, and also since agencies may not be able to ask for an additional funding request as a part of your DP specific to OCM. One of them is creating and developing an organizational change management capability plan. The intent here is that we're helping to provide materials that will improve or increase the organizational change management skills and capabilities within the agencies. So our One Washington team will develop a plan and also then develop materials, as you can see listed, both that can be used for individuals who may focus on organizational change management within your agencies, or also at the leadership level, recognizing, especially in finance departments, whether that's a CFO or finance director, who may need some additional support in sharing information with employees who will be impacted by One Washington. So we're going to look to build a plan to develop materials, and we'll be collecting feedback to know what exactly would be most helpful to agencies in building organizational change management skills and capabilities. Then our next update we wanted to share. So Liz, if you don't mind going to our next slide. And this is what I briefly mentioned, and that is updating our POC or point of contact network. So to date, we've been, very happy in working with our POCs, but we also want to be looking ahead and looking at, as we move towards the implementation phase of One Washington, what are some of the additional activities and support that agencies may need? So we're looking to further refine the POC network. We're calling it for now an agency support team. And it's really looking at how do we bring together resources in the agencies that will be focused and working on One Washington. Some of you have this already. Some of you have steering committees and already have a structure in place. And so it really may not be too much of a change for you. But the main differences will be that we want to formalize more our communications to the leadership level. And so as you look at the proposed structure, you'll see we call out specifically the agency sponsor. That may be your deputy director. In other cases, it may be the overall agency director. And just making sure we're being proactive and providing information to them as it pertains to upcoming agency readiness activities and how the agency is doing. And then we'll have, as you see, either the POC or the agency support team lead. And this may be an opportunity for the POCs to decide if the level of engagement has worked well, or if there is more engagement needed, is that the right person to be in place? And then looking at some additional subject matter expertise that we know already exists, but again, just making sure we're formalizing and helping to streamline wherever possible requests coming from One Washington and trying to make it as easy as possible on agencies with instructions and information about activities that need to be completed. There are still several next steps we need to accomplish, but at least wanted to let this group know and be aware of some of those activities we're planning and looking to develop and implement over the next couple of months to help agencies, again, recognizing you're not going to be able to necessarily spend as much time and effort focused on readiness or organizational change management based on the current budget environment. And then one last area that I'd like to focus, if all else, and you still feel like from an agency's perspective, you really do need additional organizational change management support. Liz, if you then go to our next slide, you'll see that we're looking to potentially create an organizational change management funding pool. And the intent here is that we are trying to provide an option for agencies to request additional financial support specifically for organizational change management based on the needs of the agencies. And a lot of this will be based on how much change the agency believes they're going to need to go through because of the impact of One Washington on the agency. We're still going to need to work through what does the criteria look like. You can see that we have a list, which is just the initial draft or the initial list of evaluation criteria. But at least did want to let you all know, while the focus again will be the finance systems and interfaces, the technical side of where agencies may need support, is we're looking at and evaluating other options if an agency does feel like they need additional support specific to organizational change management. More to come on what this will look like on the criteria, and then of course on the instructions and the process that the agencies will need to go through. But again, giving you the heads up that this may be coming next over the summer, and that we'll continue to work through Brianna, through OFM, as these additional guidelines and criteria are established. So with that, I will be happy to answer any questions, but I believe, Brianna, then I'll turn it back to you as we continue to work through next steps.
Thanks, Jen. So then the next topic we're going to cover is the exception process. So this is this is my agency forgot about a mission critical system, and this work needs to be done, and what does that look like? And on the One Washington budget resource page, there is a form, and I've sent the link in the chat to the budget resource page. This form and criteria has been developed by the tech team to look at, and here's just a highlight of some of it, of systems interfaces that we'll consider to include in this budget request. And Liz, if you could skip to the next tab or slide, please. And then also what we're not going to be looking at. And again, the form has the same information in more detail, and then also has questions so that you can provide additional information to the tech team, and you would support that or submit that form and that request to the One Washington mailbox, and then the tech team will review it. And actually, I think if you go to the next slide, Liz, please, there's the workflow process. Yes, so if you take a look at the form, fill it out if you think there's a big need that's missing from your template, and then question came in, when's the exception process due? So it is due to the One Washington mailbox, the form, by July 10th. But we're encouraging agencies to get it in as soon as possible, because as you saw in one of the earlier slides, the workshops are taking place in that July timeframe. So you'll submit the form, the tech team will review it, they'll reach out with any additional questions. If they decide that you're eligible to submit a budget request, then your agency will be asked to populate all of that same information for your identified system and interface that you previously did during the system and data inventory. And then from there, you'll also you'll receive an updated budget request tool that would include that additional system or interface. And it'll still be due by that August 15th timeframe.
Okay, I'm sorry. I have to come off mute on this one because I don't know if I can text it quicker. We have furlough days, and it appears that 2 days of this timeline is actually going to have our agency on furlough. I think it's going to be true of other agencies also. Did you guys take that into consideration? Because I know this date came out before the furlough days were announced. Just that.
Is the concern that you won't be able to get in by the 10th if there are exceptions, or between now, I mean, it's 22nd, between now and July 10th, that level?
I'm very concerned that we're going to have the entire agency off for 2 of those potential working days to get this done.
Okay. Oh, there's no question. Sorry, I'm just reading through the chat, and the DOT is voicing the same concerns. So the exception process, while it's listed out there, it is going to be limited again, and we will work with you if you identify a significant number of interfaces and systems that you want to submit that request or that exception, or through that sorry, request through the exception process, then the earlier you can let us know, the better. And I will circle back with our internal team just to determine if we can push that out. But again, we're One Washington's facing the same furloughs in reducing our hours, and we're pushing up against the deadline there's a lot of data and information to consolidate, and so we'd be pushing up against getting our DP and all the work that has to happen on the back end completed. All right, checking the chat. Yes, it is. I know it's a very, from DOC, they're voicing the same concerns and that it's fiscal year close, fiscal month close, and that there's a lot happening. And there is, and we understand that. And again, really appreciate everyone's time and putting effort into this. But I know, I mean, as you guys know, the OFM budget will expect our DP within a certain amount of time, and then that process will still continue getting ahead of the governor's budget and then going into session. So we'll try and work with agencies as much as we can. But again, we'll talk internally with the team and see if there's how much wiggle room there will be, and then we'll let agencies know. Okay, checking the chat and ESD, yes, one of the hard hits in the 15. And then DOC for the exception process is for agencies other than the 15 identified to complete a budget request. No, the 15 agencies, if you have something else that isn't already, that again, if you go through the exception process or review the criteria and there's a mission critical system or something significant that was missed in your system and data inventory, then you can submit a request to the exception process and we'll consider it. But again, the exceptions are going to be limited, and it's, the system and data inventory was over a pretty lengthy amount of time. And so One Washington feels pretty good that we captured, and working with agencies, captured all the really important information that we could. And then from DOC, so additional to the original system and data inventory. Yes, if something big was missed in that original system and data inventory, then and you don't have the resources to support that modification, then yeah, you can go through the exception process, and we'll determine if you're eligible to submit a budget request. Okay. Any other questions before we move on?
Yeah, this is Carl Dexter with ESD. Our organizational change manager is not on the call, so on her behalf, I'd like to know what's the deadline for being able to get information in about additional OCM resources we might need?
I will push that over to Jen. Do you have any more clarity to share on that?
Sorry, just getting to off mute. I know we were projecting early August, which I know is off of the timeline for the exception process. So I think that's what our initial timing is looking like, but we do need to follow up internally within our team to confirm that early August would not be a difficult timeline. And I also recognize, based on the comments both in the chat and on the phone regarding furloughs and the impact of who can work on different activities it's having on the agencies. So right now it is early August, and then as I said, we'll follow up if hoping it doesn't have to move earlier, but also recognizing it is after the exception process is due.
Thanks, Jen. Any other questions? Oh.
Yeah, a follow-up to that one. So basically, let's say that my organizational change manager wants to request additional resources for One Washington. When would she get the information to you folks?
And are you speaking to more than just organizational change management or specific to organizational change management?
In this case, I'm talking about organizational change management.
Okay, thank you. So it would need to be prior to OFM's deadline in August for completing all of the DPs. So it would be pretty quickly within that August timeframe for when the resource requests would need to come in.
Okay, and I'm maybe new to this, but where would I go? I mean, where would I direct my OCM manager to go to find out how to do that, how to submit that?
Right, so those are the instructions we have not yet developed. So I would suggest first go to your POC, your point of contact, and if you don't know, then either our One Washington email or myself, Jennifer Rocks, R-O-C-K-S, and I'm in the state email address if you are able to find me through OFM. If not, you can send me a chat in the IM field, and then we can follow up with you.
Okay, sounds great. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, and then there's one other question in the, oh, sorry, two more. Will this session be emailed or posted? We'll post it to the budget resource page. Liz, correct me if I'm wrong. And we can also email it out to the attendees for this meeting. And then, has the vendor been communicated and let's have impact on what the financial / resource request ends up being? The vendor hasn't been communicated yet. There's still in the due diligence process and working through negotiations. So no, right now we're not anticipating that would affect the request. And then from DOC, I thought I heard instructions for requesting OCM pool forthcoming August 1st. August 1st, is this correct? And if so, how long after do we have to submit? So I think, and Jen, correct me if I'm wrong, that for OCM, you would be submitting in that early August timeframe, but we'll push out further guidance to you ahead of that.
Yes, correct, because we still need to, so that the group knows, our One Washington team still is working through what that criteria and process will need to look like. So that's why we want to finish that work before we can follow up with specific due dates.
Any other questions before we move on? Okay. So again, the workshops and more information on that's listed on the budget resource page, but they'll be held over a 3-week period in July. And shortly after this meeting, you'll receive an email with a doodle survey in it so that you can pick which sign up for a workshop. They are going to be first come, first serve. We're going to restrict it to 5 agencies per workshop. They'll be 2 hours each, and then we are suggesting that, again, you bring a budget person, since the focus is finance systems, a finance subject matter expert, and then also someone from your IT shop, since the focus is system modification. And then again, it's to work through, answer any questions about the resource calculation tool, any other questions you have, to work with the tech team to validate your resource needs, and to help you, just to check in to help you get to done for your budget request. Next slide, please. Oh, again, here's all the dates and the times for that. And again, those are on the budget resource page. From GOL, workshops are virtual. Yes, they will be. And Again, please check out the budget resource page. It has all of the documents we went over, the business process mapping, chart of accounts, any frequently asked questions, talking points, and we'll update the frequently asked questions based off of the feedback from this meeting, and then as things progress from additional meetings and workshops that we have. And then next slide, please. Okay. Next steps, again, an additional plug for the budget resource page. Please review the tool that we sent. You'll get that doodle shortly. If you could sign up for or indicate which workshop you'd like to attend. If you think you have a system and interface that's missing, take a look at the budget exception form and the criteria for that. Look at the business process mapping tool that Chris talked through and the chart of accounts information that was provided by Trin, and then start working on your resource calculation tool. And then again, everything's due to One Washington by August 15th. I have a question, DOC, the workshop date survey, going to agency point of contacts. Yes, it will communicate through your agency point of contact. So they'll receive the doodle and then coordinate within your agency. Next slide, please. And that is it at 3:59. Are there any questions? Okay. If there aren't any questions, and again, you can email the One Washington inbox, email me, let me know if there's additional information you need. Check out the budget resource page. And again, thank you. I know everyone's busy. There's a lot going on right now. So thank you for attending.
Thanks, Brianna.
Thank you. Thanks, Lori.